All right, let's get the latest news from the eNCA Money Desk. Rupiwa Madzena joining us. More details now on what the IMF is saying about South Africa's growth prospects.
That's right, Sally. Heidi Giokos at the spring meetings in Washington, D.C. And they're basically saying that the growth projection for South Africa has been revised down to 0.1%. The IMF says it expects more energy availability next year, with growth for 2024 projected at 1.8%. The IMF says growth of 0.1% for 2023 is due to more than expected power outages, especially in the last quarter of the year. Heidi Giokos, who is attending those meetings, joins us now. Thank you very much. Or good afternoon to you, is it, Heidi, there in Washington, D.C. So it's no secret that South Africa's economy is struggling. But did we anticipate that the IMF would project such low levels of growth for us?
Yes, certainly, Rupiwa. I must say that this is not unexpected, given the massive energy crisis that South Africa is currently facing. The IMF revised down our growth projection for 2023 to 0.1%. That is a downward projection of negative 1.1%. That's a massive downward projection, and this is mostly linked to the issue of electricity availability. We do know that late last year we had rolling blackouts almost every single day, going up to as far as stage 6. The IMF picking this up and saying that they had not expected there to be so many outages, and for this reason they have revised down our growth for 2023 to 0.1%. Very bleak, very dismal, but they are projecting that come 2024 we might have growth of 1.8%, and they are predicting that there will be more electricity available, mostly renewable energy. So the electricity minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, has a huge task ahead of him, because the IMF is watching very closely as to what happens when it comes to that energy availability, and that's basically the major contributor here, that South Africa's economy cannot grow, jobs cannot be created. Businesses that are already struggling because of what happened during the COVID-19 pandemic now have to grapple with constant rolling blackouts. Just before we listen to what the IMF had to say, speaking to people from around the world, they are flabbergasted by the term load shedding. They can't understand how South Africans and our economy is subjected to constant rolling blackouts. I've even showed them how we have an app, and this is the way of life now. It might be normal to us because we've become so accustomed to it, but to the world this is not normal, because without electricity, how do these factories produce? How does the economy continue to grow? And how are jobs created? So it's a massive crisis, and the IMF, of course, facing this being the main reason why they have revised our growth to 0.1%. Let's listen to the IMF on this.
This is an economy where we have a sharp slowdown to about 0.1% growth this year. That's a minus 1.1 percentage point revision, and this mainly reflects the much more severe than expected outages in the energy sector, especially in the last quarter of 2022. But next year we expect more power to come online and the growth to recover to 1.8%. More renewable power in particular should be connected. On the inflation front, the inflation is forecasted to come down to inside the target range of the South Africa Reserve Bank, 5.8% in 2023, and then continue coming down 4.8%. So we did welcome the recent increase in interest rates.
Of course, South Africans didn't welcome that interest rate increase, but it's encouraging that our inflation outlook is on the upside this time around, Heidi Giokos. So low-income countries or developing countries like ourselves have been struggling, and there's been a higher call by the World Bank in this instance, Heidi, that there needs to be greater investment driven into developing countries and small businesses, because at this stage, that's the only way that economies are going to grow.
Yes, I mean, what's the saying? Small businesses are the backbone of an economy, and that's what it should be like for the South African economy. But we do know that small businesses have a lot of red tape and really struggle to thrive and grow in South Africa because of that red tape. The president, of course, coming out on numerous occasions trying to say that they'll do away with the red tape to allow these small businesses to grow. Just for context purposes, the IMF is holding its spring meetings, but the World Bank is also very much involved in all of this. And where the World Bank fits into all of this is that they are more funding in terms of building these small businesses, funding these small businesses, roads, infrastructure, whereas the IMF is more of a fund that loans, and we do know we have that over $4 billion US dollar fund from the IMF because of COVID-19 emergency funds that was needed back in 2020. But back to the point of investment in small businesses. How do you invest in small businesses when you don't know what's going to happen with the energy crisis? You can't separate the two matters. And this is definitely something that the IMF and the World Bank have, of course, highlighted, that it's important to invest, it's important to grow these small businesses and understand the importance of these small businesses and what they contribute to our economic growth. But you can't separate the two, because you need electricity supply. You need these businesses to be able to thrive and succeed in a conducive environment. The World Bank highlighting this as crucial in terms of really boosting economic growth for low-income countries such as South Africa. Let's listen to the World Bank.
It's important that there be more investment in small businesses, in new businesses, and that means a flow of capital. And a worry that we have for developing countries is the capital inflow. The capital flow right now is out of developing countries. So for many of the developing countries, it looks like they're in a phase of decapitalization rather than recapitalization.
And that decapitalization, Heidi, is very worrying for emerging markets like South Africa. And then finally, inflation, that's been the big one. The outlook that was given, that making a big talking point as well. So what role will this play in the reversal of the global economic downturn that we've seen?
Well, just for context purposes, Ropiwa, we do know that the IMF said that 5 years from now, global growth is expected to be around 3%. A very dismal picture at this stage in terms of what we can expect globally in terms of growth. And almost every single journalist at this World Economic Growth Outlook press briefing asked about inflation and interest rates. You can't separate the two. It's a very big worry for the IMF. The IMF saying that banks are going to have to be very careful in terms of increasing interest rates because they're worried about not being able to bring down inflation. Many economies around the world saying, but how do you do this? There's going to be a big concern about interest rates increasing and then there being a ripple effect of many saying, well, we can't survive because inflation's going up, interest rates are going up. Wages are going to likely have to increase for people to be able to survive. And at the end of the day, it's got a lot to do with these low-income countries and emerging markets, such as South Africa and Southern Africa, and possibly the rest of the African continent. A lot of the questions were based on what's happening in the US with the banking crisis at the moment, also the one banking crisis in Switzerland. But at the end of the day, we need to understand what this is going to mean for the African continent. South Africa in particular. We know there's been much outrage about interest rates being increased, and as much as the IMF said they welcome that interest rate hike, what is it going to mean for our inflation rates and what is going to happen in terms of our economic growth and how are people going to survive? So the IMF is saying they're watching this very closely, but unfortunately, Ropiwa, it doesn't look like things are going to get any better. We have not seen such low economic growth globally, and this is probably the worst that has been projected over the last 30 years. So wherever you are in the world, I think just buckle up because it's going to get a lot tougher, unfortunately.
Last week, people were talking about the days of the Great Depression and the world falling back into that time. Hopefully, it won't get to that. Heidi, of course, we'll be catching up with you throughout the week as you attend the different sessions that unpack the state of the global economy. That is Heidi Giokos, who's out in Washington, D.C.